There aren't many teams in recent NBA history that make multiple deep playoff runs in a row and are still severely underestimated by the general NBA fandom. Even when going by the numbers and being statistically one of the best and most efficient offenses of all time, it comes with being in a small market and not getting a lot of attention in the national media. The Indiana Pacers are on the verge of playing in their first NBA Finals in 25 years and their second ever in franchise history. And over the course of a decade, they quietly built an NBA championship contender. My name is Caleb, and I've been a Pacers fan my whole life. I've seen it all with this team from my earliest memories during the Danny Granger days to now, and it's so surreal seeing my team be this close to a championship. I've seen every move they've made to get to this point in franchise history where the wider NBA audience may not realize where this process even started and when the seeds were planted. You can debate when this process even began, but I'd argue that it really began during the 2015 NBA draft, where the Pacers selected a future franchise legend and one of the longest tenured Pacers in franchise history. The 2015 draft had some of the most hype in recent memory in terms of top talent. Headlined by the one and dones of the 2014-15 Kentucky team and the 2015 national champion Duke Blue Devils, it was going to be hard to miss in the lottery. But unfortunately, in hindsight, it ended up being very easy to miss outside of a few players, but the Pacers thankfully weren't one of them. The 2014-15 season for the Pacers was a transition year. After coming off back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals appearances, Paul George would break his leg in a Team USA exhibition that summer, keeping him out almost the entire season. While they tried to make a playoff push without him, the injury bug and consistent lineup changes throughout the year would end without a playoff appearance, but they'd end up with a lottery pick. Roy Hibbert was traded to the Lakers that offseason, David West would leave for San Antonio, and the early 2010s Pacers that took the Big Three heat to the brink every season was fading in front of our eyes. The 2015 draft was a chance for a soft reset, and they'd select Miles Turner out of Texas with the 11th overall pick to be their man in the middle for the future. Turner was coming into the league during the right time. A stretch big who could hit the long ball and be a rim protector was perfect for the three-point revolution the NBA was going through at the time. Coming into Texas, he was a five-star recruit out of the Dallas area, and after his first and only college season, he'd win Big 12 Freshman of the Year and was the start of a long line of Texas centers to be lottery picks in the coming years. As the longest tenured Pacer currently, Miles Turner has been through three different eras of Pacers basketball. After playing 2 years with Paul George in 2016 and 2017, being eliminated in the first round in both seasons, George was traded to OKC during the 2017 offseason for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. What people may forget is that around this time, Turner was kind of positioned to be the franchise player. Before anyone thought that Oladipo and later Sabonis would become all-stars, Miles was supposed to be the next in line after Reggie Miller and Paul George. And while it didn't necessarily work out that way, with Victor's ascension and later Sabonis, Turner was still the glue that held everything together during this time. Despite being in trade talks almost every single season, Turner somehow survived every offseason and trade deadline to remain a Pacer. Lakers fans to this day were calling for his move to LA for a box of scraps, but thankfully he has remained in Indy ever since draft day. He and Devin Booker are the only two players from that draft class to remain with the teams that drafted them, a pretty rare feat nowadays, especially a decade later. After two all-star selections for Victor Oladipo, he'd suffer a career-altering injury in 2019, which he returned from a year later, but he was never the same, which effectively ended the short-lived Oladipo era. But in 2019, the Pacers would unknowingly sign a player who'd become a fan favorite and one of the premier backup point guards in the NBA. The Pacers signed TJ McConnell during the 2019 offseason after spending his first few years in Philly throughout the process era to being on some of the best Sixers teams in years. He was going to be a pivotal piece off the bench, especially on a fairly valuable contract. Domas will become the next Pacers All-Star in 2020 and 2021, but it was the beginning of a very weird era of Pacers basketball. Head coach Nate McMillan was let go after the 2020 season, and former Raptors assistant Nate Bjorkgren was hired and never really got the locker room behind him, and he was fired immediately after that season. Ever since Sabonis got to Indy, questions were raised about whether he and Turner could play together, and in the long run, the answer was pretty clearly no. Rick Carlisle will return to Indiana for the second time as head coach and third time overall after being on Larry Bird's staff from 97 to 2000, and as the main guy from 2003 to 2007. Going into the 21-22 season, it wasn't very clear which direction the team was going in. It was really time to make some moves, and come the 2022 deadline, the Pacers would pull off the greatest trade in franchise history. After only a season and a half in Sacramento, the Kings decided they wanted to move off of Tyrese Haliburton and send him, Buddy Hield, and Tristan Thompson to Indiana in exchange for Domas, Jeremy Lamb, and Justin Holiday. Haliburton, by his own account, was crushed by the trade as he sincerely wanted to be in Sacramento. It's not easy being traded a year and a half into your career, especially considering you were a lottery pick not too long before that. He felt like they gave up on him, but Rick Carlisle saw the potential in the young guard. with him calling him after the trade an elite young point guard that affects the game positively in many, many ways. With the Pacers near the bottom of the East during his first half season in Indy, the Pacers used that time to evaluate what direction they were going to take in the future. This was the perfect time to really give the rebuild some direction, with Halliburton being the centerpiece. The 2022 offseason was an eventful one for Indiana. There was going to be a complete roster overhaul outside of Halliburton, Hield, Turner, Jalen Smith, and 2021 first-round pick Isaiah Jackson, who was raw his rookie year but showed flashes as a potential backup center. With Miles Turner's Pacers future in the air, as it seemed like it was every offseason, the Pacers would offer restricted free agent DeAndre Ayton a 4-year, $133 million deal, which would have been the highest ever for a center at the time. Thankfully for Miles Turner in Indiana, the Suns would match the offer for Ayton and he returned to Phoenix, and Turner would remain a Pacer. To make room for Halliburton as the sole floor general of the offense, the team also moved Malcolm Brogdon to Boston in a trade that brought a plethora of Celtics that sat at the end of the bench during their finals run. Initially, to the general NBA world, it seemed like the Pacers gave him up for nothing, but included in the trade was Aaron Nesmith, who was another 2020 lottery pick who couldn't quite find his way in Boston due to the depth at his position, with Brown and Tatum leading the way. In Indiana, he was going to at least get a chance to play and prove that he could be a solid contributor to an NBA team. The 2022 draft saw the Pacers in the lottery again for the second time in 2 years, and with the 6th pick, they take Benedict Mathurin, sophomore guard out of Arizona. The reigning Pac-12 Player of the Year shot up draft boards after an impressive sophomore season, as he was noted for his scoring ability and confident demeanor on the court. And then come the second round, they take Andrew Nembhard out of Gonzaga, a 4-year player who was named first team All West Coast Conference as a senior, and one of the leaders of the Bulldogs that made multiple deep runs in the tournament. A very solid draft class for a team that was hopefully in the middle stages of a rebuild, with young players and veterans like Turner to help turn things around. Asking for a playoff berth at the end of the 2022-23 season would have been a bit far-fetched, but any improvement on the court and record-wise would have been welcomed by Pacers fans everywhere. But what the 2023 season did bring was a much clearer direction of where the team was going and where they could end up one day. Halliburton was proving himself to be an all-star level guard and was emerging as one of the best point guards in the East. His chemistry with Miles Turner made them one of the best point guard center duos in the entire league, and with Sabonis no longer playing next to Turner, his game was starting to reach its full potential that we thought it could when he entered the league. The team was also seeing contributions from its other young players like Mathurin and Nembhard. Mathurin started the year atop the Rookie of the Year race alongside Paolo Banchero, and he immediately was not afraid of the moment, taking last shots during close games early in the year. Andrew Nembhard would prove to be a very capable defender off the bench, and eventually as a starter, he took advantage of the early opportunity he received from Coach Carlisle. His greatest moment as a rookie came mid-season, where he hit a game winner in LA to beat the Lakers at the buzzer. Aaron Nesmith would also get his real first opportunity as a starter in the NBA after starting 60 games during the 2023 season, and earn himself a 3-year, $33 million extension at the end of the year. Miles Turner would also sign a long-awaited extension with the team in January to at least keep him in Indy through 2025. The bench mob, led by TJ McConnell, alongside players like Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson, the 2023 Pacers would end the year 35-47, but improvements were made in almost every aspect of the team. Tyrese Halliburton was an All-Star, Ben Mathurin was named first-team All-Rookie, and there was an established core for the future. The Denver Nuggets would end up winning the 2023 NBA Finals, and one of their key pieces off the bench would see dollar signs in Indiana. Bruce Brown signed a 2-year, $45 million deal with the Pacers. Definitely an overpay at the time, but would be very worth it, and we'll get to that in a bit. What wasn't an overpay though was Tyrese Halliburton signing a max contract with the Pacers to ensure he's here for a long time. They'd also trade 2 second-round picks to the Knicks for Obi Toppin, who had underperformed in New York relative to his draft status, but for 2 seconds, you can't really pass up on a player like Obi. The Pacers were in the lottery again, but were hoping to leave the lottery status in the near future. They'd acquire Jarris Walker out of Houston, a solid defensive prospect and former 5-star recruit to help Indy on the defensive side of the ball. They'd also get a relatively unknown Ben Shepherd out of Belmont late in the first round, a 4-year player that could bring a bit of experience to an otherwise younger team. The Pacers lived up to their name and started that season fast, being one of the most fast-paced and high-scoring teams in the entire league. It seemed as if this team was destined for the playoffs at the very least, and Halliburton was playing at an all-NBA level. The chemistry of this team was the best I had seen in years, and when it came time for the NBA's first in-season tournament, they'd steamroll their way all the way to the championship game before losing to the Lakers. This year's Pacers team would also establish a few new rivalries and reignite a few old ones, most notably the rivalry against Milwaukee. In a late December game game where Giannis would score a franchise record 64 points against Indiana. Post-game antics involving an alleged stolen game ball would lead to one of the most bizarre endings in recent NBA history. The Pacers needed their enforcer back, a guy at the end of the bench who could be a veteran presence in the locker room, so not even a week after the game, they'd re-sign James Johnson, who had been released after the 2023 season. January 2024, the Pacers kept the season rolling and made a splash trade that made the Bruce Brown signing during the offseason seem genius. Pascal Siakam's time in Toronto had run its course as the team was going full rebuild mode. The two-time All-Star and NBA champion was on the trade market, and Indy was the perfect fit for him. The Pacers would send Brown, Jordan Nwora, and 3 first-round picks in exchange for Siakam. A second All-Star caliber player was now in the blue and gold, and making the playoffs now just seemed like the bare minimum. But they do it without Buddy Hield, who they trade away near the deadline after not being able to come to terms on a contract extension. Tyrese Halliburton was named an NBA All-Star and the Pacers' first All-Star starter since Paul George in 2017. All-Star Weekend taking place in Indy made for a complete circle moment for the franchise while they were gaining momentum as a team. This was one of the best constructed rosters in the NBA. Later in the year, after Mathurin suffered a season-ending labrum injury, but the team wouldn't really miss a beat, and they finished the year 47-35 and clinched the 6th seed in the East, their first playoff berth since 2020. Outside of the in-season tournament, their 2024 playoff run was really the first time the wider NBA audience was going to get an in-depth look at this Pacers team. From Andrew Nembhard being an absolute playoff riser, Halliburton activating his clutch gene, and arguably the best bench in the league getting busy, the Pacers put on an offensive clinic. After beating Milwaukee in the first round, albeit without Giannis the whole series and Dame for a couple games, they beat the Knicks in 7 in the second round, reigniting the Pacers-Knicks rivalry that was the highlight of 90s playoff basketball. The first 2 rounds were filled with game winners and altercations of all sorts, but their season would end in a sweep in the conference finals against Boston. But if you were actually watching those games, the Pacers pushed the Celtics to the brink despite not winning a single game. With Halliburton out due to injury during the last 2 games, the Pacers went into the 2024 offseason in a place where no one outside of the fan base expected to be, and they'd be underestimated again for the time being. The Pacers had a relatively quiet offseason, but were able to retain Pascal Siakam and reward him with a 4-year, $189 million deal. Jalen Smith would leave for Chicago, but they bring in former number 2 pick James Wiseman to compete for backup center minutes. They'd come into the season with an almost identical roster to the year before, but when you have good teams with chemistry like the Pacers, you can't interfere with that too much. I've seen good Pacers team chemistry get absolutely cooked and blown up in the past. For example, trading away Danny Granger back in 2014, despite all his injuries, to make room for Evan Turner, which did not work out in the slightest. Learning from the sins of the past, the Pacers were going to go ahead and run it back with most of the guys they had before. And to start the 2024 season, it was anything other than ideal. They would win their first game of the year in Detroit, but Wiseman would tear his Achilles within his first 5 minutes of action with the Pacers, be out for the rest of the year, and be released midway through the season. The Pacers would struggle to get off to the hot start like they had gotten out on last year, dealing with injuries and playing mediocre basketball, to be completely honest. Isaiah Jackson would also tear his Achilles, causing him to miss the rest of the season. Aaron Nesmith dealt with an ankle injury after he stepped on the foot of Pelicans head coach Willie Green. At the start of January, they were 16-18, and questions were starting to raise on whether any significant moves needed to be made if they wanted to get back on track. An underrated move that they would make in the meantime was trading for Heat backup center Thomas Bryant to play the same role with the Pacers. The IU alum was going to be back in the Hoosier State and play crucial minutes when Miles Turner wasn't on the floor. But as the team would seemingly get healthy again, they turned their season around post All-Star break and quietly had one of the best records in the league during that time, finishing the year 35-15. Pascal Siakam was the Pacers' lone All-Star, as he was the most consistent member of the team from start to finish of the season. It didn't at first seem like they could improve on the season before, but they'd win 50 games for the first time since 2014 and clinch home court advantage in the first round in a rematch against their newest rival Milwaukee Bucks, and in the second round against the 64-win number 1 seeded Cavs. Despite Giannis going God mode throughout the series, the Pacers would take it in 5 games, including one of the most unlikeliest comebacks in the final moments of Game 5, which saw Tyrese Halliburton take Giannis one-on-one for a game-winning layup after Milwaukee blew a 7-point lead with 40 seconds remaining. A similar moment on the road in Game 2 of the Cleveland series saw Halliburton call a game against the Cavs after they themselves blew a 20-point lead to go down 0-2 at home. Then in maybe the greatest playoff game of my lifetime, I saw Aaron Nesmith turn into prime T-Mac and hit 6 threes in a row in the fourth quarter to lift the Pacers out of a 20-point deficit. Halliburton steal the hearts of Knicks fans in the Garden on a game-tying 2 that touched the heavens and absolutely stole Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. I might make a full video on this playoff run one day and the 2025 Pacers season as a whole, but every move the Pacers have made in the last decade has led to this point in the franchise's history, and the wider NBA world has finally been put on notice. I hope I could highlight some of the major points in one of the NBA's best rebuilds over the last few years to become a contender for the first time in a decade and one of the only times in my lifetime that they're competing for an NBA championship. My name is Caleb. If you want to support the channel, please like and subscribe. Appreciate y'all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.